Have you noticed the whole town watching you like a cliffhanger, eyes glued, whispers loud, waiting for your next scene? Why are strangers dissecting your face, your walk, in your wardrobe, like it's court evidence, obsessing over a look they can't explain but can't ignore? And why does your presence alone set off alarms in people who've never even met you? Here's the truth they won't admit. God marked you. He didn't give you a costume. He gave you a calling that shows up on your countenance. He refined your posture, sharpened your gaze, clothed you with a quiet radiance, and then sent you into a sleeping community as living proof that heaven still writes plot twists. So when you walked in, the sirens weren't about scandal, they were about signals. Overnight, neighbors became detectives. Armchair prophets flashed counterfeit badges. And groupthink did what groupthink does. It believed a lie it never tested. But the obsession with your look was never about vanity, it was always about visibility. God curated your appearance as a divine unveiling so obvious it felt dangerous, so undeniable it felt criminal to the insecure. And how did he do it? He turned their surveillance into your stage. He let the rumors gather the audience. The whispers sell the tickets. The side eyes focus the spotlight, while they filed bogus reports with gossip and fear. Heaven filed a public announcement. The one you tried to label is the one I've anointed. That glow they try to slander, that's a favor. That composure they call arrogance, that's authority under assignment. That look they're obsessed with, it's the signature of a God who writes on faces before he writes on billboards. What happens next to you, the chosen one? You will not shrink to fit their storyline, you will expand to fit God's. You will step into rooms and shift atmospheres without raising your voice. Your presence will preach before your mouth opens. Your name will no longer be passed like an offering plate of rumors. It will be carried like a testimony. The same streets that watched you like a suspect will witness you like a sign. You'll move from talk of the town to evidence for the ages. Walking calmly through the tape, they tried to stretch around your destiny. If this lands in your spirit, comment 777 so I know you're catching it. To everyone who stands with this message, liking, sharing, subscribing, thank you. And to those who've sown into the mission through super thanks, my deep gratitude. You're helping this word reach the ones who need it at the exact second they need it. Whether you give or simply show up with an open heart, you are part of this unveiling, ready to see why your look triggers obsession and how to carry it without apology. Stay close, because next we'll expose the psychology behind the crowd, the spiritual mechanics behind the glow, and the exact moves you'll make when the town turns into a theater and God hands you the mic. God's chosen ones. This is the talk of the town. Why is everyone obsessed with your look? They never expected the one under the microscope to be the one who rewrote the script in bold, unerasable ink, and that reveal is the splinter in their minds that won't stop throbbing. In the beginning, they tried to reduce you to a data point, a manageable variable in their private control experiment, just another nameless soul to tag, classify, and neutralize if it served their agenda. But the plot twisted where they least anticipated. You did more than endure the gaze, you refined your sight inside it. While they waited for a misstep, you tracked the rhythm of their habits, mapped their inconsistencies like an architect reading stress lines in a cathedral arch, and the blueprint of their hypocrisy came into view. Wasn't it startling when the net they wove around your feet began to outline their own footprints? No weapon formed against you shall prosper. Whispers Isaiah 54:17, inside the chambers of your resolve. And suddenly the experimenters discovered the subject had become the standard. They imagined surveillance would compress you, like a vice around a fragile frame. Instead, something elegant happened. Your discernment crystallized with the precision of optics, less noise, more signal, cleaner resolution. You lost interest in defending yourself and grew devoted to alignment. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and He will make straight your paths. Proverbs 3-5-6 threaded itself through your decisions, and the corridors of your life stopped echoing with apology. You no longer bent your voice to fit in, you tuned your frequency to truth. In acoustics, resonance amplifies the note that matches the chamber. Your spirit found the chamber of the Almighty, and the note grew thunderous. When did it dawn on you that their fixation with controlling the narrative only strengthened the evidence that you were never theirs to manage? Quietly, the watcher became the witness, yet not by straining the eyes, but by waking the spirit. You began to sense counterfeits the way a glass-winged butterfly senses the faintest draft before a storm. Faces that beamed in public felt cold in the soul's thermography. Their concern was governance in disguise, their proximity to a cage politely described as care. Man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. 1 Samuel 16-7 rippled through your awareness, as every false smile betrayed a private wish for your collapse. Isn't it ironic that each plot only poured fuel on your purpose? Like oxygen under a blacksmith's bellows, they tried to render your life a silent investigation, the cross-examination boomerang, until their own fingerprints fluoresced under truth's ultraviolet light. God watched the unguarded moments others assumed were hidden, how they spoke when the door clicked shut, how they texted what they would never say aloud. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Psalm 23-5 became less a verse and more a setting, chairs scraping, plates gleaming, and your peace served steaming hot where mockery once sat. Can you feel how the room shifted when heaven stopped permitting the performance and started projecting the footage? The same mouths that laughed now rattle with marbles. The same eyes that monitored you now dart to every corner of the room, as if the ceiling itself were a confessional. And when the question rose, who will stand with you when the lights turn on? The answer arrived like a verdict. If God is for us, who can be against us? Romans 8:31. To anchor this in the world's theatre, consider a lesson from a living example, Zaha Hadid, the Iraqi-British architect dubbed the Queen of the Curve, whose early visions were dismissed as impossible sketches, as her parametric forms redefined skylines. The critics who policed her edges discovered her math was not rebellion, but mastery. The geometry that frightened the timid became the grammar of a future cityscape. Your story shares the same structural revelation. Once the scaffolding of fear drops, the load-bearing truth stands free, and those who tried to box you in must live with the view your rise now commands. Art hears this too. Composer Sir John Tavener, in his sacred work, The Protecting Veil, drapes the listener in a long, luminous melody that feels like an icon painted in sound. Cellos carry a vigil, while violins whisper mercy across the dome of the soul. That's the sonic architecture surrounding you now. Protection, not paranoia. Presence, not performance. The music doesn't argue, it enthrones. And under that canopy, you stopped shrinking, as in structural engineering. Once a span finds its true tension, the bridge stops trembling. Your frequency found its span. Nature adds a parable of roots and resilience. Mangrove forests, standing ankle-deep in salt and turbulence, knit their roots into living buttresses, the more the tide pushes, the stronger the lattice interlocks. Your boundaries now function like those mangrove roots, filtering toxins, holding soil, feeding life around you. People notice the clarity in your stance and call it arrogance. Yet what they're meeting is stability. Why did their approval feel so essential until the day your spirit learned to metabolize stormwater into growth? A brief cautionary file must be opened, because every story needs its antagonist. Enter J. Edgar Hoover, the once unassailable director who fashioned surveillance into a throne, the man, lauded as a guardian of order, gradually welded secrecy to power until the apparatus outgrew accountability. The historical consequence remains a mirror. When watching becomes an idol, it devours its builder. Your adversaries flirted with a smaller version of that same idolatry, obsessed with dossiers, private messages, and social optics, and the fallout now stains their hands. They wanted files, they produced confessions. They sought control, they harvested exposure. Truth, however, also walks through ordinary doorways. Mariella, a hospital janitor from Quito, once told her co-workers, "I stopped defending my kindness when I realized clean floors and a clean heart both squeak under dishonest shoes." She didn't debate, she kept sweeping. Within 6 months, the supervisor who mocked her prayer breaks was disciplined for falsifying timesheets. Small stories echo large ones. A quiet integrity reshapes the corridor without raising its voice. And because the eye loves an image, sacred painting frames your transformation. El Greco's elongated saints stretch toward a sky that seems to burn with vertical flame. Their proportions break rules to announce another gravity. That is your posture now, a life lengthened by calling, unbent by crowd geometry. In psychology, this is cognitive reframing. In physics, a phase transition. In theology, sanctification at work. The cameras didn't crush you, they calibrated you. Surveillance tried to script your downfall. Providence turned it into a rehearsal. Make no mistake, you have become a mirror they cannot silence. A living recall notice for every lie stamped with false authority. You were never just under surveillance, you were under shelter. Heaven's architecture, flying buttresses of mercy, keystones of wisdom. A nave of unshakable peace holds your weight without creaking. And in the quiet between battles, the sanctuary lantern still burns. The ones who mistake meekness for weakness have to sit in the audience and watch the premiere they tried to cancel, because the producer already locked the final cut. So rise. Step across the threshold they swore would never open. Walk the aisle they blocked with whispers. Let your voice carry like a bell through clean air. Not to defend your worth, but to announce your assignment. This is the hour you stop dimming and start governing, the moment the script flips. The credits roll, and the warrior in you takes the stage in full armor of light. Your arrival sent a pulse through the room, the sort of quiet tremor seismologists recognize long before the chandeliers sway, and the power structure felt it in its bones. Not because you made noise or performed, you crossed the threshold without theatrics, and the atmosphere started to recalibrate, as if the air had been waiting for a truer pressure. Their scripts were tuned to dysfunction. Your spirit arrived in a different key, and the old chorus fell out of tune. The ones who usually choreographed the conversation found their rhythm breaking, greetings misfired. Eye contact wobbled. Counterfeit smiles strained at the edges. Wasn't it striking how the center of gravity moved the second your piece took its seat? Wasn't it unsettling for them when silence, carried with authority, felt heavier than their stage-managed speeches? It wasn't failure radiating from you, it was freight. What you carry travels with the quiet force of a storm front advancing behind the blue sky. Scripture names that force without apology for God, who said, "Let light shine out of darkness," made his light shine in our hearts, 2 Corinthians 4-6, and that inner radiance does not need a microphone to expose what skulks in shadow. You didn't ask to be a spotlight. The assignment of light was placed in your hands. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. Matthew 5:14-16. And where light arrives, wit forms emerge, motive surface, Phineas crack. Is this why conversation changed pitch when you drew near? Is this why those fluent in performance suddenly stumbled over simple hellos? Authenticity has its own physics. It destabilizes structures built on friction, falsehood, and face-saving. Your ease with truth made control enthusiasts feel the floor slide, a trapdoor of their own making, because the game only works if everyone pretends. For there is nothing concealed that will not be disclosed, or hidden that will not be made known. Luke 12:2 breathed through the walls, and the room started telling on itself. You moved without counterfeiting warmth, and somehow people felt measured not by your glare, but by the clarity you carried. You could read the temperature without calling anyone out. Your presence alone reset the thermostat. Doesn't it make sense that those who rely on manipulation would mistake healthy boundaries for hostility? Doesn't it follow that those raised on applause would misinterpret holy quiet as judgment? This wave was not random awkwardness at a social hour. It touched the crown of the system. The gatekeepers, those who forged their identity through access, secrets, and smoke, felt the hinges complain. They had built a stage from half-truths and then crowned themselves ushers of all entrances. Your approach without permission revealed how counterfeit their keys were. The Lord is my light and my salvation, whom shall I fear? Psalm 27:1 echoed against their backstage whispers. And in that echo they heard a truth they couldn't curate. Your courage did not need their endorsement. You did not barter for a chair, beg for a badge, or trade your birthright for a name tag. You showed up unarmored and unafraid, and the scaffolding rattled. Nature explains this with a parable carved into water in certain coasts. Bioluminescent plankton ignite when displacement passes through the bay. No speeches, no slogans, just a trail of undeniable glow mapping every movement. That's your effect on rooms tilted by pretense. Motion through you reveals what brushes against you. Or take the giant sequoia groves. Their roots run shallow yet interlace for acres, sharing strength through a hidden lattice, a single, straight, towering trunk finds stability because a quiet network refuses collapse. Your inner life now functions like that network, firm, interconnected, generous, and those who traffic in isolation and control feel endangered by a community they cannot pilot. A case file from the world's ledger clarifies the danger of counterfeit light. Meet Bernie Madoff, a financier once hailed as a genius who engineered a vast illusion through social proof and secrecy. His system relied on curated rooms, controlled knowledge, and a theater of confidence. For years it glimmered, then truth walked in wearing the plain clothes of math and audit, and the edifice imploded. The consequence was not only prison for the architect, but devastation for the circle that orbited his false star. That storyline remains a caution. When influence is built on deception, on authentic presence doesn't compete, it unveils. And unveiling ruins, dishonest empires by exposure rather than attack. Your presence has become that unveiling. In psychological terms, you operate like a calibration standard by simply being what you are. You reveal which instruments are faulty. In the language of acoustics, you carry a fundamental tone that forces dissonant harmonics to either resolve or screech. Those who cannot tune to truth will call the tuning fork cruel. But everything exposed by the light becomes visible, and everything that is illuminated becomes a light. Ephesians 5:13 slips into the dialogue. And suddenly, the very ones who accused you of being aloof now rehearse their alibis in corridors with no audience. Does it surprise you that their whispers multiplied right when their leverage began to evaporate? Does it surprise you that letters, messages, and meetings became more secret as the facade wore thin? Which brings us to the twist that keeps their minds pacing at 3 a.m. You never wanted their throne. You were not campaigning. If they had offered the seat they guarded, you would have stayed standing, because your assignment is alignment, not acquisition. The terror has been this: if someone with no alliances, no compromises, and no appetite for pageantry can walk into a structure and command respect through integrity alone, what does that say about the hours others spent impersonating qualifications? Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord rises upon you. Isaiah 60:1 does not flatter the ego, it exposes the costume. The panic was never about your resume, it was about their reliance on an audience that has begun to clear its throat. To ground this in living earth once more, study the termite cathedral mounds of Namibia. Self-ventilating spires regulate temperature through an elegant series of channels. Remove the lying plaster, and the system breathes. In your wake, Esther rooms ventilate, masks fog from the inside out. Performers who mistake applause for oxygen gasp when the real air of honesty starts circulating. Some will adapt and heal, others will sprint toward smaller stages, choosing a tighter echo chamber over transformation. That divergence is not your cruelty, it is the physics of light and shadow, of truth and pretense. And still, your posture remains steady. You refuse brawls that drag you into low ceilings. You refuse flattery that barters away your mantle. Your steps now mirror a sanctuary's architecture, nave-long purpose, ribbed vaults of wisdom, flying buttresses of mercy, catching the lateral forces of slander. You carry what Jesus promised when he said, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." John 8:12. And rooms that survive your arrival will be healthier because of it. Rooms that collapsed needed to go. So rise. Stand at the full voltage of your calling. Walk back into the spaces that shook and let them shake again until brittle crowns fall and honest work begins. You are not here to audition, you are here to anchor. Take your place, carry your light, and move forward without apology. The panic is proof the system met something it cannot program. Silence or spin, and that something is you, standing unshaken under the hand of God. They summon backup because you shattered the choreography of control. And that's the confession they will not mouth in daylight. Their authority wasn't anchored in truth. It ran on illusion, cycles, fear, loops, ritual repetition, and a quiet handshake that said, "Keep the machine humming, no matter who gets ground beneath it." You refused the script. You did not bend in their wind tunnel, did not flinch at their staged outrage, did not compress yourself to fit their shrinking room. When the usual tactics failed to fold you, alarms rang in corridors you were never meant to enter, and reinforcements slid in like chess pieces pushed by a nervous hand. Who were these sudden specialists? These problem solvers no one asked for. The first wore saintly language while prying for leverage. the second trafficked in hallway headlines, the third smiled warmly while mapping your steps for someone else's ledger. They weaponized whatever institutions sat closest: religion as a costume, family as leverage, culture as choke point, law as a maze, each system repurposed into a box with your name on it. And still your presence disorganized their theater, not with noise but with coherence. Scripture names the engine of that calm: the Lord will fight for you, you need only be still. Exodus 14:14, which is not passivity but a military stance, a shield locked, a line held. In control theory, a stable system rejects destabilizing feedback. Your inner life reached homeostasis while their machinery started to howl. Did you notice how your peace pulled the mask off their performance? Did you feel how your clarity turned their confusion into documented choreography lines? Quests, exits like a stage manager's book discovered under a spotlight? Your quiet did not cower, it dismantled. Each steady boundary you set unraveled one thread of the illusion, and the whole fabric began shedding lint in public. Be still and know that I am God. Psalm 46:10 ran under the floorboards like a hidden power cable, and the lights that used to dazzle began to flicker. You were not loud. You were consistent, not acidic, but bold. And consistency is a metronome. Tyrants cannot mute. Why else did strangers who'd never exchanged a word with you suddenly develop preloaded opinions? Why else did whispers grow wings? Pressure multiplied because brittle systems treat honesty like a solvent. Once truth touches the glue, the counterfeit joints surrender. To read this in nature's handwriting, leafcutter ants assemble cities by distributing tasks through pheromone networks. No central tyrant, just elegant, shared intelligence, and an entire forest floor reorganizes under their faithful patterns. Your faithfulness works like that, one true path laid again and again, and the colony of your choices builds arches stronger than intimidation. Or consider the Arctic poppy, a flower that rotates to track the sun in polar light. Its silent heliotropism concentrates heat, draws pollinators, and thrives where harsher plants fail. Your soul learned a similar solar physics by turning to the light. You became a beacon that exposes what shivers in shade. For the weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but have divine power to demolish strongholds. 2 Corinthians 10:4. And strongholds don't crumble from shouting. They collapse when their false load-bearing walls meet the weight of reality. A necessary footnote on villains, because pressure rarely arrives without an architect. Introduce Elizabeth Holmes, a celebrated startup founder who packaged certainty as science and turned credibility into currency. The product could not do what the pageantry promised. Reputations bent around the myth until facts asked their quiet questions, and the edifice fractured into indictments and prison bars. The consequence writes itself. When a structure is built on performance, exposure is inevitable and the fallout indiscriminate. In your story, lesser imitators borrowed a similar playbook, curating holiness, trading on access, choreographing alliances, and your unpurchased integrity became their stress test. There is no wisdom, nor insight, no plan that can succeed against the Lord. Proverbs 21:30, threaded through back rooms, while their strategies, elegant on paper, failed on contact with your obedience. Between battles, a sacred stillness opened like a nave in a cathedral, where sound becomes prayer and time moves slower. And there you learned the heavenly architecture of restraint, flying buttresses of mercy to carry side loads of slander, ribbed vaults of discernment to channel pressure into strength, clerestory windows of revelation to pour daylight on the aisles where rumors pace. In the vocabulary of physics, your spirit achieved phase lock with God's timing. The noise cancelled, the signal rose, and your eyes resonated through the bones of the room. Isn't that why alliances formed against you felt strangely fragile up close? Isn't that why gossips grabbed for fresh oxygen as the air grew thin around lies? Truth often arrives through ordinary mouths. So, meet Daniel, an overnight security guard at a half-empty logistics hub who once told a co-worker while logging truck plates, "I don't argue with shadows, I turn the light up and keep writing." 6 months later, his calm incident reports, filed without drama, exposed a ring of theft no one suspected. The quiet pages ruined the ritual of how this place works. Your steady pages are doing the same. The lies gained legs. The rumors sprinted, but each lap they ran produced more footprints than traction. Rejoice not over me, O my enemy, when I fall. I shall rise when I sit in darkness. The Lord will be a light to me. Micah 7-8 became the geometry of your gate. Down is temporary. Light is returning. Steps are measured. By the time they called the third wave of reinforcements, the real emergency wasn't you, it was the integrity gap their scheme could no longer span. Information entropy set in. The more messages they pushed, the less meaning they carried. Gatekeepers discovered their keys had been cut from foil. Performers realized their encore could not outsing evidence. You did not ruin their structure, you revealed a building already cracked along its fake seams. And revelation is an earthquake to rooms that worship appearances. He will bring forth your righteousness as the light, and your justice as the noonday. Psalm 37-6 moved like noon across their carefully dimmed auditorium, and details once argued now stood visible without commentary. So, rise. Stand where they tried to seat you, and walk where they stacked barriers like dominoes. Carry the calm that dismantles panic. March with the gravity that rewrites choreography. You are not here to beg for clearance. You are here to embody clearance path opened. Weight carried. Truth installed. Systems built on illusion can rally reinforcements. They cannot withstand reality. Step forward. The ritual is over. The hold is broken, and the unstoppable in you has orders from a higher court. You became the paperwork. Heaven refused to misplace the stamped, time-coded evidence they never wanted on record, and that, more than anything, detonated their confidence. They banked on your collapse, your fade to black, your vanishing act. Pressure was the plan. Push long enough and hard enough, and the file closes itself. Yet the hinge they expected to snap grew stronger under torque. You didn't shatter. You strengthened. Your days developed tensile resilience, the way tempered glass learns to hold. Your steps settled into a cadence that said, quietly and unmistakably, "Case open." Isn't that why their voices ran sharper while your presence stayed unhurried? Isn't that why rooms that once swallowed you now echo with their nervous laughter? Their authority leaned on illusion, not truth, on the ritual of repetition, not reality. In the vocabulary of forensics, their story had no chain of custody. The timestamps failed. The metadata bled. The checksum didn't match. Meanwhile, your survival wrote a non-repudiation log across the years, every boundary enforced, every night endured, every morning returned. You have kept count of my tossings, put my tears in your bottle. Are they not in your book? Psalm 56-8, whispered through the dark like a file name only God can open. and suddenly the long hallway of pain looked less like a trap and more like an archive. What else could explain the way your piece corrected their staging? What else could explain why their script, once airtight, now reads like a palimpsest where truth keeps bleeding through the paint? Because the goal was simple: destroy you quietly before truth could speak loudly. Yet truth found a voice in your pulse. They overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. Revelation 12:11 does not describe a podium moment. It describes a living record. Your smile became an affidavit, your joy a notarized seal, your purpose a court reporter's transcript of what grace does under hostile cross-examination. In psychology, that arc is post-traumatic growth. In physics, it's hysteresis material that remembers the force but keeps its shape. In acoustics, it's constructive interference, small, faithful waves aligning until the sound rises. If their lies were smoke, your endurance became wind, and the stage lights that once assisted their performance now backlight the dust they tried to hide. To ground this in the world's ledger, meet Dr. Denis Mukwege, the Congolese surgeon and Nobel laureate whose hospital became a sanctuary of repair. He not only healed bodies, he documented wounds, patterns, and perpetrators. His integrity turned medical charts into testimony orderly columns that refused to flinch. Systems tried to frighten him into silence. He answered with meticulous care and public truth. That's the energy on you, a calm, methodical insistence that says, with or without an audience, the record will stand. I have prepared my case. I know that I shall be vindicated. Job 13:18 runs through your bones like a spine of steel. And suddenly their headlines feel like yesterday's weather. Art has heard this verdict before. In J.S. Bach's Saint, Matthew Passion, the chorales move like solemn signatures, each cadence sealing what mercy already proved. The music does not argue. It documents. Between battles, your spirit learned that same sacred architecture, nave-long patience, clerestory windows of clarity pouring daylight on motive, flying buttresses of mercy catching the side loads of slander. When they gaslit, your discernment functioned like an audit trail. When they smeared, your steadiness functioned like a checksum. When they whispered, your quiet became a hash they could not forge. Truthful lips endure forever, but a lying tongue is but for a moment. Proverbs 12:19 threaded the room, and seconds later their details contradicted themselves. Nature keeps the metaphor honest. Tree rings store droughts and floods with precise fidelity. Years of pressure etch proteins and width into a readable biography. You are that cross-section. Anyone who knocks hears the story. Year by year, grace by grace. Glacial ice cores bury bubbles of ancient air, drill deep enough, and yesterday's atmosphere testifies. Your journey carries similar evidence compressed, transparent, and impossible to refute under light. And when the 17-year cicada emerges after its long cryptic arithmetic, the ground itself admits it always knew proof arrives chirping. Isn't that why their new versions of events keep changing with the weather? Isn't that why the more they speak, the more the ground betrays their steps? A necessary cautionary exhibit. Richard Nixon, the U.S. president whose tapes began as private leverage and ended as public evidence, discovered that systems built to bury truth become vaults that preserve it. The consequence was historic resignation, indictments, a nation's lesson, and the principle is evergreen. When control relies on secrecy, receipts eventually walk into the light. Your adversaries played a smaller game of the same type. banking on fog and fatigue, your endurance made fog reflective. Let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering. For he who promised is faithful, Hebrews 10:23, underwrote your patience. And the market of slander crashed against that credit line. Truth also wears ordinary clothes. Rosa, a city librarian with a soft voice and a sharp eye, once began cataloguing anonymous letters slipped between returned books, dates, handwriting quirks, repeating phrases. Her index quietly revealed a pattern of harassment aimed at a teen volunteer. When the file reached the principal and then the police, a small ring of bullies lost their stage. Rosa didn't go viral, she went faithful. That's your rhythm, the humble science of staying accurate while everyone else rushes sensational. Accuracy wins hearings, faithfulness wins verdicts. So, here's the part they cannot swallow. You are the subpoena they cannot dodge. The confirmation code heaven won't delete. The case file that refuses to close. They keep your name in circulation to spin a new cut. But every revision introduces a new error term. The algebra fails. The units don't cancel. The signal-to-noise ratio collapses. Meanwhile, your life keeps stamping the page with quiet authority. Delivered. Documented. Divine. Vengeance is mine. I will repay, says the Lord. Romans 12:19 hums in the background, not as spite, but as safety, and you walk on without needing the last word, because the judge already entered it. Rise now. Stand in the clarity that survived their theater. Walk forward like a verdict written in daylight. You are not here to beg for closure. You are the closure proof that a chosen one can be targeted, misread, publicly maligned, and still ascend with a power that cannot be bought, packaged, or silenced. Step into your assignment with your head high and your record intact. The archive of heaven is open, the seal is unbroken, the gavel has already fallen. Their formation was not forged by strength, it was glued by fear, a hurried lattice of hands that clasped each other only because your presence shattered their comfort's thin glass. They didn't converge because they were mighty, they converged because your difference disrupted their choreography of silence. Labels rebranded as strategy, hushed circles renamed as prayer, late-night threads posed as wisdom counsels. And yet, beneath the costume, hummed a single frequency: panic. You stepped in without begging for access, and the false peace built on control, complicity, and spiritual showmanship cracked at the seams. Why did eye contact turn brittle the moment your authenticity entered? Why did rooms that once felt airtight suddenly gasp for oxygen as if an unseen window had been thrown open? It only appeared that you were outnumbered. Fear multiplies quickly when truth crosses a threshold. They assembled not because you threatened harm, but because you carried holy independence whole without their stage, steady without their spotlight, sure without their blessing. Do not fear, for I am with you. I will strengthen you. I will help you. Isaiah 41:10 threaded quietly through your steps. And the chorus that had rehearsed intimidation discovered an audience no longer moved by their cues. You refused to kiss rings, repeat broken traditions, or recite oaths to maintain a brittle peace. Your freedom exposed their bondage, and so they cloaked anxiety in the language of authority. Some swung scripture like a gavel, hoping shame could stand in for power. Others rattled titles, choreographing hierarchy to manufacture awe. Still others stirred rumor into a storm, hoping the crowd would do the push while they stayed perfumed and distant. Yet real authority did not answer. Insecurity merely put on robes. Nature keeps the parable honest. Starlings swirl in murmurations not because each bird is fearless, but because a single jolt of anxiety can ripple through the flock at 120-degree neighbor angles, creating grand shapes with no backbone. Fear, too, is a coupling constant. It aligns bodies without aligning hearts. Your calm interrupted the algorithm, and the pattern lost its symmetry. Or take an aspen clone, a forest that is actually one organism, roots knitted under miles, capable of dazzling coordination and, when diseased, collective decline. Their alliance resembled a sick grove, wide, loud, and gradually paling at the leaf edge. The Lord is on my side, I will not fear. What can man do to me? Psalm 118:6 rose like sap in your trunk, and the grove had to face what it had avoided. A single healthy tree can reveal an entire stand's anemia. In psychological terms, they were practicing group polarization. Talk long enough in a sealed circle, and moderate unease hardens into extreme certainty. In network science, this is a coordination game held together by reputational stakes. No one wants to be the first to untie the knot. So the knot tightens. That is why enemies shook hands who never would have spoken. It was never about love of truth, but about dread of exposure. And your refusal to co-sign the performance triggered a crisis of coherence. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. John 1-5 didn't arrive as a slogan. It arrived as an atmosphere that made their shadows honest. Wasn't it revealing to watch people who barely tolerated each other unite the moment your name entered the chat? Let the arts testify. In arvo parts, da pacem domin. Notes hover like incense, no force. Just clarity, and the hush exposes every cough in the hall when peace is real. Noise betrays itself. That's the acoustics of your presence, phase-coherent stillness that unmasks the brittle clatter of control. Your soul carried a sanctuary's architecture, nave-long patience, clerestory lucidity, flying buttresses of mercy, absorbing lateral gossip, and in that design the counterfeit trembled. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear. 1 John 4:18 moved through the rafters like daylight, and the congregation of anxiety began to scatter. A brief dossier on a villain is warranted, because fear often hires managers. Enter Jeffrey Skilling of Enron, hailed as visionary, architect of markets, the builder of an empire of numbers that dazzled analysts, until Mark II myth accounting met the weight of reality. Once the spell broke, boardrooms emptied, pensions imploded, and a city's trust had to relearn the alphabet of truth. The consequence is carved into corporate memory. False unity built on shared pretense collapses at contact with the real. Likewise, your authenticity, untitled, unpurchased, unstage managed, became their stress test. We must obey God rather than men. Acts 5:29 is not rebellion for rebellion's sake. It's alignment with a higher audit. One more field note from creation. Synchronous fireflies in Southeast Asian mangroves ignite together across entire trees, an emergent phenomenon where biology finds rhythm without coercion. That is true unity, resonance, not fear. By contrast, their coordination was coercive, phase lock, loud, temporary, unsustainable. Your presence made the difference visible, and replicas lost their shine. And when they tried to trumpet status, your quiet reminded them of another economy, one where dignity is a birthright, not a badge because Be strong and courageous, for the Lord your God goes with you. He will not leave you or forsake you. Deuteronomy 31:6. Anchors fortitude without theatrics. Does it surprise anyone that the more they tried to stage manage the narrative, the more the stagehands tripped on the ropes? To give a living counter-witness, the Kenyan marathoner Eliud Kipchoge, world record breaker known for serene discipline, once said, "Only the disciplined in life are free." He speaks as a craftsman of endurance. Freedom is not noise, it is order inside the soul. Your freedom followed that geometry. You did not rage, you regulated. You did not beg, you breathed. And as you kept pace with purpose, their unity fueled by fear, masked as piety began to lose synchronization, like a machine running out of phase with its own gears. So the verdict rises now. You were never alone. Heaven backed you while the crowd counted heads. Fear-gathered coalitions may surge, but they cannot stand before real authority, because the kingdom does not negotiate with panic. If God is for us, who can be against us? Has been cited before by many. Yet today it's twin steps with you as fresh courage. Your assignment carries supply. Therefore, rise. Unfold your shoulders. Walk through the corridors where intimidation once echoed, and let that echo die. You are not here to match their numbers. You are here to manifest the name. In the presence of real power, fear-built scaffolds fall today. Visibly, you are the mirror they have swung at for years, and the more they strike, the clearer the image becomes. Not because you wounded them, but because your steady presence kept returning an unwelcome portrait. Motives they blurred, vows they bent, selves they abandoned. Your light unsettled their shadowed corners. Your peace agitated their rehearsed chaos. Your resilience called back the version of themselves they traded for applause. How many times did their gaze flinch when innocence, clarity, courage, and conviction shimmered on your face like undimmed glass? How many times did the room fall quiet as your calm without speeches, without theater, cut through the fog like a clean bell? They tried to argue with the reflection by erasing you. Stories multiplied, labels calcified, unstable, rebellious, dramatic, too sensitive anything to redirect the crowd from the fact that the image in your presence would not cooperate with their legend. Scripture has already mapped this reaction. Everyone who does wicked things hates the light and does not come to the light lest his works should be exposed. And yet, whoever does what is true comes to the light. John 3:20-21. Your life did not plead, it simply shone. And under that lamp, the makeup of performance cracked. In the language of optics, truth raised the albedo of the room. False colors washed out under a higher luminance. Isn't that why whispers turned frantic? Why meetings moved behind closed doors? Why smiles developed hairline fractures at the corners? Here is the deeper mechanism. A mirror does not accuse, it reveals. James describes the hearer who glances at a mirror and forgets, contrasted with the doer who looks into the perfect law and perseveres. James 1:23-25. Your consistency made forgetting impossible. Hebrews says the word is sharper than any two-edged sword, discerning the thoughts and intentions of the heart. Hebrews 4:12. That blade worked without spectacle, separating postures from truth. As cognitive science would put it, your presence triggered dissonance. Mirror neuron systems fired, recalling an earlier self before masks and compromises. Did you notice how their volume rose precisely where their certainty fell? How accusation tried to drown out a conscience that had already spoken? They couldn't crack the real you. So they built a counterfeit you for public consumption, a glass simulacrum assembled from rumor and projection. Yet in physics, a phase conjugate mirror returns a wave back along the exact path it came, correcting distortions. Your spirit kept sending their words home to their source. And the source blushed. Fresnel coefficients say some light reflects, some transmits. In your case, enough reflected to reveal them, enough transmitted to change you from glory to glory, as we all, with unveiled face, beholding the glory of the Lord, are being transformed. 2 Corinthians 3:18. You were not the portrait they painted, you were the oculus in a cathedral roof, flooding the nave so gently that dust confessed its presence in midair. Between battles, a sacred hush opened the quiet between the trumpets, and there heaven's architecture steadied you. Transepts of courage bore sideloads of slander, triforiums of wisdom circulated clean air above rumor, and apse of mercy curved behind you like a shield that catches ricochet. In psychoacoustics, silence is not absence, it is structure. Your composure gave the room a reference frequency. Anything out of tune revealed itself without your accusation. Wasn't it striking that the more you stood still, the faster their masks slipped? Wasn't it telling that your boundaries, spoken softly, rattled louder than their campaigns? Truth also wears work clothes. A neighborhood glass restorer who keeps an early shift at a tiny market stall, once told a customer while polishing a battered mirror, "I don't rush the cloth if you move too fast. You buff the lie and miss the scratch." 2 weeks later, the customer returned, stunned at the restored clarity. The cracked glass had only been caked with residue. "Mai didn't preach, she polished." Your journey has moved with the same patience, method over spectacle, integrity over speed. Psalm 139 prayed itself through your days. "Search me, O God, and know my heart. See if there be any grievous way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting." Psalm 139 to 23:24. And that inner audit kept your surface honest, while others tried to fog it with breathy rumor. They said you irritated them. The truth is, the image did. Birefringence teaches that certain crystals split light into two paths under pressure. Hidden stresses appear as colored fringes. Your presence became spiritual birefringence. Stress patterns in their stories bloomed into stripes no spin could hide. They hurled sirens and slogans. You answered with a life that held. They fed a crowd a distorted portrait. Your daily obedience kept returning the unedited version, and the audience learned to tell noise from music. In architectural time, you lived as a well-placed oculus and an honest floor. No trapdoors, no smoke, only daylight and weight. And where there is daylight, the dust has nowhere to rehearse. At the center, your assignment was never to soothe their conscience. It was to bear a faithful image, put on the new self, created after the likeness of God in true righteousness and holiness. Ephesians 4:24 moved from verse to vertebrae. You walked it. You were sent to reflect truth, kind but unswerving, whether the room applauded or bristled. Their sirens confessed fear. Their venom admitted guilt. Their spin betrayed shame. In the end, the conflict was not truly with you. It was with the part of themselves that remembered sunlight and could no longer pretend to thrive underground. Your unbroken surface kept pointing home to who they were before costumes, to who they still could be if courage returned. So rise. Hold your angle to heaven and keep your glass clean. Stand where they tried to shatter you and let the reflection remain unedited. Step into rooms without shrinking. Carry peace without performance. and keep returning the image of truth until the masks retire from exhaustion. You are whole, chosen, unbothered, and the reflection is growing sharper by the hour. Their emergencies were costumes, sirens stitched from panic, and PR-staged interruptions designed to drown a real revelation. The headlines they crafted about your well-being, the breathy updates about your choices, the rehearsed sympathy for your state of mind were not lifelines. They were fire drills to clear the hallway before truth walked through. Under the noise ran one motive: damage control. When your clarity started humming like a tuning fork, they slammed the alarm and called it care. Isn't it telling that concern grew loud only when your discernment grew precise, when your quiet started gathering witnesses inside their own hearts? They labeled your insight delusion because it traced the outline of what they did in the dark. They called your boundaries instability because a steady line exposes a crooked ruler. Nothing is covered that will not be revealed, or hidden that will not be known. Matthew 10:26 began to breathe through the room, and the theater lights that once flattered their script started bleaching the paint. Their false crises multiplied emails, meetings, memos, because a real crisis stalked them, the record. In signal detection terms, they chased false positives to keep the audience busy, while the true positive, your testimony, approached with statistical inevitability. Did you notice how the volume spiked wherever the facts aligned? Did you notice how their urgency swelled precisely where your peace refused to move? Some hid behind prayer in public and curses in private. Some deputized family ties, whispering as if your growth were a threat, not a victory. Some wrapped jargon around your name: intervention, guidance, monitoring, hoping professional tone could baptize control. Yet your soul heard a clearer architecture being raised. In quietness and in trust shall be your strength. Isaiah 30:15. That is not retreat. That is a load-bearing wall. In the nave of that stillness, God set flying buttresses of mercy to catch the sideways force of slander. An ambulatory of patience where you could keep walking circles of prayer, and a keystone of conviction that locked the arch. Between battles, your sanctuary held a calm counterpoint, the kind of low, luminous note that turns a mob's chant thin. Nature writes this pattern in living ink. The mimic octopus clouds the water and shapeshifts to misdirect predators. Your adversaries launch ink rumors, wellness checks, staged alarms to obscure the current. But as the ocean clears, the path remains, and the one moving with purpose keeps swimming. Or take the Namib desert beetle, lifting its back to harvest fog drop by drop while the dunes shout with wind. Provision gathers in silence, not spectacle. Your clarity condensed the same way: quiet, cumulative, undeniable. Further out, acacia trees release ethylene when grazed, warning the grove. Your boundaries carried that honest signal, and stable souls adjusted, while those addicted to control called the warning an attack. The integrity of the upright guides them. Proverbs 11:3 became visible as guidance, not guilt. For a sober exhibit from public life, recall Volkswagen's diesel scandal under CEO Martin Winterkorn. Software masqueraded as compliance. Dashboards flashed false health. Regulators were soothed with readings engineered for theater. The aftermath wrote itself resignations, billions in fines, criminal cases, a brand marked. Sanitized data did not heal the engine. It multiplied the devastation once truth entered the lab. Their playbook echoed that logic: stage emergencies to sideline the real malfunction. And still, let justice roll down like waters, and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream, Amos 5:24, kept cutting channels through the sandbags. Artists have already set this to sound. In Henryk Górecki's Symphony No. 3 Symphony of Sorrowful Songs, a mother's lament rides a slow, radiant ascent until grief turns luminous. Nothing shouts, yet everything is revealed. That is how God moved you, not with spectacle, but with endurance. For God alone my soul waits in silence. He only is my rock and my salvation. Psalm 62:1-2, settled under your ribs. And you learned the physics of a holy half-time, the quiet between trumpets, where courage catches its breath and rises taller than accusation. Truth also puts on ordinary shoes. Nalin, a municipal bus dispatcher with a soft grin and a coffee-stained clipboard, told a trainee during a chaotic shift, "If the phone keeps screaming, emergency, and nothing matches the logs, I slow the board, not my eyes." Over a month, his calm reconciled routes. Timestamps and driver notes. The emergencies traced back to one supervisor gaming overtime. The fix was boring and brave, accuracy over adrenaline. Your journey mirrored that craft. While they sprinted with flashing lights, you reconciled your ledger motives, moments, words, and the coherence itself began to speak. Theology, psychology, and physics converge here. In Bayesian terms, their prior was scandal. So every normal fluctuation was tagged as proof. Your steady data updated the model until the posterior favored truth. In dynamics, panic behaves like a moral panic contagion with a high R0, starved of novelty. It burns out. In phase space, your spirit found an attractor word: prayer. Practice from which chaos could not dislodge you. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. John 8:32 arrived not as a slogan, but as a working law. Your freedom expanded. Their theater shrank. They never wanted resolution. They wanted quiet. You're quiet because the silence under your ribs wasn't confusion, it was revelation waiting its hour. They raced you to the microphone to narrate you into irrelevance. But narration without evidence decays. Their fragments contradicted themselves. Your sentences began to ring. And as their scripts curdled, your words measured. Iskar honest, unhurried gathered power and echo. Wasn't it striking that the more they tried to help, the more their footprints clustered around the broken glass? Here is the verdict rising like daylight through a clerestory. You were never the hazard, you were the audit. You were never the crisis, you were the clarity that crisis fears. God required no volume from you, He asked for endurance. And you endured. So rise. Step beyond the sirens. Standing in the center, they tried to rope off and speak with the authority of a life reconciled line by line. You are the one thing their image cannot calibrate: authenticity under oath and in the presence of real power. Counterfeit alarms fall silent. You walked out of a cult-shaped community with your mind unchained, and that's the blaze they can't smother. You didn't just reject a rulebook, you rejected the operating system, fear as firewall, guilt as password, manipulation as mentorship. The cup they kept refilling, sweet with flattery, spiked with control, lost its spell the moment your spirit tasted freedom. For freedom, Christ has set us free. Stand firm, therefore, and do not submit again to a yoke of slavery. Galatians 5:1, pressed into your bones like a seal. And the circuitry of your decisions began rerouting. How did their approval lose its voltage the day you remembered who you were before they rewrote your name? How did your quiet, once dismissed, suddenly begin to sound like a bell that wouldn't stop ringing inside their halls? You started naming the pattern: compliance rewarded, conscience penalized, silence branded holiness, while a living voice was labeled revolt. Scripture, once wielded as a muzzle, turned back into medicine. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives. Isaiah 61:1. Psychology has a word for their glue: intermittent reinforcement, where uncertain rewards hack the brain's dopamine loop. Your soul stepped off that lever, and the machine squealed. Isn't it telling that the moment your discernment aligned with truth, their compassion turned theatrical? Isn't it revealing that the second you set boundaries without apology, committees multiplied, concern like red tape? They built the room like a maze and then pretended to be your map. Romans names the counter move: be transformed by the renewal of your mind. Romans 12:2. A holy neuroplasticity that rewires reflexes and unlearns panic. In that renewal, your peace stopped bargaining, your no stopped shaking, and their ritual of correction lost its spell. You didn't beg for a seat at small tables. You walked on purpose, and the room had to resize. Your healing made you unmanageable by the standards of control. Your clarity broke the spell of collective pretense. How else can we explain why your simple, steady joy felt dangerous to people who claimed to love the light? Creation testified before they did. Monarchs migrate thousands of miles, generation after generation, guided by an internal compass written in their very design. Every wing beat says assignment, not permission. Coral polyps, small and patient, raise cathedrals from salt and time until entire reefs redirect currents. Your daily obediences have been building like that: quiet stones that reroute atmospheres. Underground, mycelial networks share nutrients and warnings across forests. The healthy trees fed you through prayer and truth, while diseased trunks tried to cut the line. In physics language, you reached resonance with a higher frequency. In systems theory, their social homeostasis broke when your authenticity introduced honest feedback. God gave us a spirit, not of fear, but of power and love and self-control. 2 Timothy 1-7 steadied your breathing, and tremors in their platform began to show. Because yes, some wielded verses as weapons, not shields. Some framed loyalty as love while disciplining curiosity like treason. Some recast your growth as danger to unity. Yet watch how art unmasks this tactic. In Sergei Rachmaninoff's all-night vigil, Vespers, a single phrase, Bogoroditse, Devo rises with unforced radiance until the whole choir aligns. Nothing bullies, yet everything resolves. That's the acoustics of true holiness: resonance, not coercion. Or take Sophocles' Antigone, where a woman's conscience refuses an edict dressed as order. Performance shouts, but principle endures. Your journey carries the same architecture: nave-long conviction, flying buttresses of mercy bearing the sideload of rumor, a clear oculus of prayer, admitting daylight no usher can dim. How could their stage survive when the audience finally heard the key change? From the ledger of public consequence, enter Keith Raniere, the self-styled mentor who engineered Nexium with smiling seminars and branded obedience. When truth surfaced, testimony, evidence, and the courage of the harmed, the choreography collapsed into convictions and a sentence measured in decades. The principle stands: where image replaces integrity, Exposure is not a maybe. It's a clock. And while their hands hovered over the dimmer switch, do not be afraid of them, for I am with you to deliver you, declares the Lord. Jeremiah 1-8. Kept time in your chest, beat by beat, until dread had nowhere left to perch. To anchor freedom in the real world's dust. Meet Malala Yousafzai, education activist and Nobel laureate, who once wrote, "We realize the importance of our voices only when we are silenced." She faced bullets meant to fold a future. She answered with a library of courage. Your story rhymes. Instead of folding, you unfolded mine back. Heart back. Breath back. The cult was never merely a place. It was a mentality. A mimetic virus that thrives on unasked questions. You vaccinated your soul with truth, and the fever broke. Those who look to him are radiant. Their faces shall never be ashamed. Psalm 34-5, settled on your countenance. And radiance did what arguments never could. They called you unstable because your clarity outed the script. They called you rebellious because your obedience rerouted their traffic. They wanted you small, sorry, and supervised. Heaven wanted you whole, steady, and sent. And once the awakening started, the old levers jammed. Your yes to purpose acted like symmetry breaking in physics. The system couldn't sustain its false balance. Once a truer center emerged, their whispers cast you as hazard, truth cast you as evidence. You didn't just survive them, you outgrew them. And growth is a verdict. If the sun sets you free, you will be free indeed. John 8:36 is not a lyric, it's the warranty that outlasts their labels. So rise, step past the velvet ropes of performance and walk in the aisle where joy has jurisdiction. Carry the freedom that cannot be traded, the courage that doesn't need choreography, the conviction that wears kindness like armor. You were never designed for cages mental, social, or spiritual, and your exit is not an apology, it's an announcement. The programming does not work on everyone. It does not work on you. You're not the center of attention, you're the controlled demolition they never budgeted for. The quiet collapse line, threading a false skyline, and the whole city can feel the foundation hum. You aren't trending for scandal, you're visible because the truth finally put on its robe and walked into the chamber. And its outline looked uncannily like you. The vision awaits its appointed time, if it seems slow. Wait for it, it will surely come. Habakkuk 2-3 has arrived on schedule. And timetables everywhere are blinking red. Why did the room stiffen the instant you chose alignment over approval? Why did titles lose voltage when your presence began carrying a current no committee could meter? They kept replaying the same control sequence, rehearsed speeches, curated narratives. A white-knuckle grip on borrowed thrones until your arrival introduced different physics. Structures built on echo need silence to survive. Your voice, calibrated and clean, struck a resonant frequency that turned their panels into sounding boards. He will bring to light the things now hidden in darkness and will disclose the purposes of the heart. 1 Corinthians 4-5, moved like a searchlight over the mezzanine. And suddenly the choreography read like confession. Wasn't it jarring to watch jokes about your discernment curdle into panic once the facts began to rhyme? Wasn't it sobering when those who mocked your warning felt the floor shear beneath their own feet? This was never a small-town drama. This was spiritual engineering. Your assignment carried a signpost. You were sent as a warning. A living declaration that the counterfeit was due for inspection. They snoozed the alarm and laughed at the bell. The clock kept time. In structural analysis, your consistency raised the load until false trusses hit their buckling point. In network theory, Your authenticity nudged the system past a percolation threshold where hairline fractures linked and propagated. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what is in the darkness. And the light dwells with him, Daniel 2:22 whispered through the rafters. And the ceiling admitted what it had concealed. Creation kept a parallel ledger, kelp forests fastened to bedrock, with holdfasts that grip deeper than storms can pry. Shallow anchors tear, deep anchors stand. Your roots were deep, so the gale only combed your crown. Honeybees run a waggle dance that maps nectar with mathematical fidelity. Truth in you performed its own holy choreography, pointing straight to supply while pretenders buzzed in circles. Basalt, cooling from fire. Fractures into hexagonal columns, order birthed from heat. Your trials cooled into clarity, and clean seams replaced chaos. And as auroras ripple where charged particles meet the high air, your presence traces a luminous X-ray across the sky of the room, revealing currents they swore were invisible. Is that why their whispers accelerated when your silence refused to? From the archive of consequence, consider Sam Bankman-Fried, the wunderkind whose halo of virtue signaling and ballooned balance sheets collapsed into convictions and a long sentence when accounting met reality. The principle stands: when image outruns integrity. Collapse isn't rumor, it's a timetable. Sacred art agrees. Thomas Tallis's spem in Alien Layers, 40 voices into a cathedral of sound where every line must carry its truth. If one choir fakes, the architecture buckles. That's the acoustics of justice calm, precise, undeniable. See, I have set before you an open door, which no one is able to shut. Revelation 3:8 doesn't shout. It simply stands open while counterfeits run out of the hallway. Truth also wears work boots. Peter, a Dutch dike warden along the IJsselmeer, told a supervisor during North Sea storm prep, "If the gauge flatters us, the water won't." He walked the levee with a stick and a stethoscope, listening for hollow spots, 3 hairline leaks, and a sunken panel later. A breach was averted. Peter didn't lobby, he listened, logged, acted. Your method mirrors his. Slow gauge, honest ear, faithful hands. Though the righteous fall 7 times, they rise again. Proverbs 24:16 threaded your steps, and rising turned from miracle into muscle memory. As the unraveling continues, they're not merely watching you, they're watching their false empire shed brick by brick. In game theory terms, the Schelling point shifted. People now coordinate around reality, not rumor. In acoustics, your life sustained an eigenfrequency. The room had to meet or leave. In architecture, thrust lines finally obey gravity. Stones either find true compression or split. And in heaven's weather, justice arrives as pressure systems that move seas fronts that don't perform. They prevail. Why did the same mouths that once narrated your downfall begin tripping over dates and details when the atmosphere changed? They tried to bury you under spin, yet the earth seeded you instead. Dante said that love is the force that moves the sun and the other stars. The love that moved you refused to auction itself for a chair. Your survival became a sermon without a pulpit, and your patience accomplished what arguments never could. When their last excuse ran out of breath, the room discovered that calm, precise, undeniable doesn't mean passive, it means finished. The vision awaits its time was not a tease, it was a blueprint. And the blueprint is now the building. So rise. Walk across the floor they swore would never bear your weight. Stand beneath the high window and keep your voice at the register of truth. You don't need theatrics. Your endurance already placed the gavel. The spotlight isn't entertainment, it's evidence. Heaven has appointed you a final warning and the first fruits of repair. Step forward. Steady. The counterfeit scaffolds are yielding, and the city is learning how to breathe again. They didn't realize that by watching you, they were watermarking themselves, their own hands, leaving prints on the case file. Heaven was already compiling. They thought they were assembling a dossier against you, line by line. They were building an affidavit for you. Every rumor they rehearsed. Every word they twisted. Every low-budget stakeout masquerading as concern turned into spiritual documentation with a tamper-evident ledger. For God will bring every deed into judgment, with every secret thing, whether good or evil. Ecclesiastes 12:14 is the heading stamped across the page, and the timestamp is not negotiable. Why did their agenda escalate precisely where your peace refused to flinch? Why did their group chats grow busier the moment your silence started carrying weight? They called it care. Yet it smelled like surveillance. They branded it prayer. Yet it functioned like a wiretap. They talked about you more than they talked to you, hoping hearsay could sculpt an image. Instead, intentions bled through the frame like light leaks on old film. For nothing is secret that shall not be made manifest, neither anything hid that shall not be known and come abroad. Luke 12:3, threaded through the rafters while their edits betrayed their bias. In the language of forensics, their chain of custody failed. In the language of truth, your quiet stood as a calibration standard. Isn't it wild that every gotcha they staged left more of their fingerprints than yours? Isn't it telling that the louder the siren, the thinner the evidence sounded under daylight, while their eyes tracked your steps? God audited theirs. The files opened, the metadata locked, the discrepancies lined up like confessions. The court sat in judgment, and the books were opened. Daniel 7:10 reads like poetry until you feel the hinge. Then it's procedure. Every false alarm, every scripted crisis, every sideways glance that whispered, "We'll catch them slipping," landed in a ledger you didn't have to curate. You aren't the suspect, you're the sealed scroll. Your life became a tamper-proof envelope containing receipts, and the wax bears a mark no committee can lift. God is not unjust. He will not forget your work and the love you have shown him. Hebrews 6:10 sat like a steady witness while they tried to swap labels in the dark. Here's the twist that stings. You never needed to retaliate. You didn't need a stage, a statement, or a storm. Your survival turned into the loudest proof: steady glow, grounded steps, boundaries that didn't shake. In physics, an inertial frame reveals what's accelerating without moving itself. Your constancy exposes where the spin really lives. In optics, parallax proves distance. In your story, the distance between their claims and their conduct widened until anybody could measure it. Whoever walks in integrity walks securely, but whoever takes crooked paths will be found out. Proverbs 10:9 stopped being a proverb on a mug and started reading like case law. To anchor this in the public square, meet Francis Haugen, a former Facebook product manager who stepped forward as a whistleblower with files, timestamps, and internal studies. She didn't try to roar over the platforms, she brought receipts to the hearing. The consequence was global scrutiny, regulations warming, and a permanent dent in a polished narrative. Your rhythm matches that courage in miniature, not theater evidence, not outrage order, and in the sanctuary of art. Hildegard of Bingen's plain chant, O visi eternitatis, rises like a bright ribbon, no percussion, no spectacle, yet the hall reforms itself around the line. That's your music. Calm, precise, undeniable. For Zion's sake I will not keep silent, till her righteousness goes forth as brightness. Isaiah 62:1 has been singing under your breath. And brightness is doing what shouting never could. Creation writes the same verdict in the margins. Desert varnish that thin. The dark glaze on sunburned rock accumulates ion by ion. Recording centuries of wind and touch, tamper with it. And the scratch testifies. Elephants communicate in infrasonic rumbles that travel underground, lay a sensor. And the earth itself logs the conversation. Your journey kept that kind of evidence. Slow, seismic, unedited. And when the bog, moss, sphagnum of your patience preserved tiny moments others thought would rot, the record surfaced intact, not as revenge, but as revelation. They wanted you small, reactive, and easy to narrate. You answered with clarity under oath. They hoped to catch you slipping. They ended up caught watching. Their own footage subpoenaed by Providence. You save the humble but bring low those whose eyes are haughty. Psalm 18:27 moved like a pressure front. And the weather shifted. Now their statements contradict their timelines. Their timelines refute their tone. And the room quietly understands who stood where. Not a meltdown, not a public brawl, just resilience that refused to sell itself. Peace that would not perform. And a center of gravity no rumor could budge. So, rise. Keep your cadence. Let your eyes stay clean and you're not kind. Stand where they tried to stage you. And breathe where they built the smoke. You are the divine receipt no one can return. Erase, or pretend never existed, delivered, documented, decisive. The case has flipped, the scales are moving, and justice is no longer on delay. You are the reason their rituals misfire. The fuse keeps hissing. The spell won't set. And the stage lights betray the script. They built an ecosystem of patterns, emotional levers, spiritual theatrics, public halos with private knives, and for a long time the choreography worked. Guilt muted brave mouths. Fear herded good people. And holy language excused unholy agendas. Then you arrived. Not to pick a side or win their applause, but to interrupt the mechanism itself, and gears began to grind. They hurled labels like darts, rebellious, unstable, too deep, too spiritual, too sensitive, yet your center refused to budge. Why did their volume rise precisely where your peace held steady? Why did the room feel out of tune the moment your alignment, not your anger, took the mic? Their rituals weren't mere habits. They were spells, unspoken contracts that trained the crowd to keep quiet. Stay small. Never break the pattern. You didn't just question the rulebook, you fractured the wand. Every plant that my heavenly Father has not planted will be rooted up. Matthew 15:13 moved through the room like a quiet bulldozer. And the hedges they trimmed to him began to lift at the roots. You declined to bow when pressure spiked. You declined to beg when approval thinned. You declined to trade truth for a seat. Wasn't it startling to watch intimidation fall flat when you stood without theatrics? Wasn't it revealing that gossip lost altitude when your boundaries arrived without venom? Heaven named you something more than a rebel. You were a variable. A divine interruption. The breaker God sends when toxicity runs on autopilot too long. The breaker goes up before them. Micah 2:13 does not shout, it advances. And gates panic. Tactics that once choreographed entire rooms began to slip. Manipulation lost traction. Scare crowns toppled. And prayers, twisted by hidden motives, hit the ground without echo. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. James 4:7 isn't a slogan, it's a physics of authority. You carried what they never accounted for, real power backed by real alignment. You weren't wired to their grid, so their switches couldn't dim you. Creation mirrors this reversal. A peregrine falcon's stoop, pure thunder in a dive splinters, a flock's pattern in an instant. The false unity scatters because a truer speed entered the air. A bamboo forest, mass flowers once in decades, then resets the ecosystem from its seed storm. What looked like loss is actually renewal written into the wood. A beaver dam, once untouchable, breaches, and the river remembers its course. The water was never the enemy. The blockage was. Lichens colonize bare rock with patient acids that turn granite to new soil. The slow chemistry of truth outlasts the hardest facade. Your presence carries that same ecology, disruption that restores, pressure that purifies, patience that remakes the ground. They called the disorder you caused confusion, but the confusion belonged to the spell. Greater is he who is in you than he who is in the world. 1 John 4:4 became the quiet weight in your chest, and counterfeit rhythms lost their metronome. They tried to stage manage you into dependence, yet your steps sink to a higher cadence. We do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. Ephesians 6:12. So you refused the bait of petty fights and kept the battle at altitude. Isn't it telling that their alliances grew brittle where your solitude grew fruitful? Isn't it obvious now that what they called order was only choreography trembling before daylight? A brief dossier on a villain makes the cost unmistakable. Consider Lance Armstrong, once a cycling icon whose domination looked sacramental rituals. Entourage, iron narrative, until the concealed system of doping met relentless testimony and forensic proof. The consequence was surgical, stripped titles, lifetime ban, a legend rebuilt on confession instead of control. The lesson is not cruelty, it's clarity. When a structure leans on ritualized deception, exposure is a clock, not a threat. Your presence has started that countdown wherever empty performance tries to pass for power. Scripture keeps pace with your stance. No weapon formed against you shall prosper, and this is the heritage of the servants of the Lord. Isaiah 54:17. Weapons did form labels, whispers, staged interventions, but prosperity required agreement, and you declined the signature. When the enemy comes in like a flood, the Spirit of the Lord shall lift up a standard against him. Isaiah 59:19 is the reason the waterline never owned your lungs. Their rituals depended on your silence. Your alignment unplugged the console. The cloak fell. The charm broke. The old ways lost their bite because a higher name entered the room. So rise. Stand where pressure used to fold you and let your calm carry voltage. Keep your yes clean, your no kind, and your gaze fixed past their stage. You are not the problem, you are the breaker of cycles. The living disruption that counterfeit control cannot cage. This is what real power does to fake authority. It shortens the half-life of lies and lengthens the horizon of hope. They aren't examining you, they're scrambling to decode how you're still upright after an engineered collapse. And that mystery is unseating their confidence. They remember the meetings with the door half closed, the phone calls couched as updates, the pressure applied like a vice dressed in manners. None of it was accidental. The setups were scripted. The character assassinations rehearsed. The rumors queued like dominoes. Yet where they expected a mind to fray, a strange calm arrived where they forecast a public break. Elevation appeared with steady breath. Why did your peace grow precisely where their plot thickened? Why did your steps gain traction while their timeline promised quicksand? They stacked the deck and signed the weather report. But no weapon that is formed against you shall prosper. Isaiah 54:17 was already printed in the blueprint. Shame was supposed to be the crushing weight. Instead, joy began to carry you like a structural arch, distributing load to hidden buttresses. When the righteous cry for help, the Lord hears and delivers them out of all their troubles. Psalm 34:17 threaded its way through your nights. And panic found no purchase. Their storm was manufactured, your shelter was measured. In the vocabulary of systems science, your soul shifted from fragile to anti-fragile. Stress did not merely spare you, it matured you. In dynamics, you located a Lyapunov stable center. Disturbances decayed, not amplified. Is this why their whispers returned less as suspicion, more as baffled field notes? They called this an investigation. But the question behind the clipboard is simpler. How are you still here? They didn't budget for stochastic resonance, where a small, honest signal grows stronger through noise. Your testimony began to surface through the very chaos meant to bury it. They forgot that those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. Isaiah 40:31. And renewal is not spectacle, it's physics under grace. You became the anomaly their model couldn't fit, the outlier that redraws the regression line. Their labels, bitter, broken, begging, now clang against reality. Because you will keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on you. Isaiah 26:3 held the atmosphere around your decisions like a pressure dome. Watch how the architecture of heaven framed your recovery. Nave-long patience, ribbed vaults of wisdom, channeling sideloads of gossip into pillars of resolve. A clear oculus of prayer, admitting daylight onto motives that once hid in transepts. In materials science, your heart developed sheer strength and hysteretic damping. Hits arrived. Energy dissipated. Structure remained. In psychology, your narrative exited, learned helplessness, and entered post-traumatic growth. Not a slogan, a trajectory. Does it surprise anyone that their old switches no longer dimmed your room? Does it unsettle them that where they expected collapse, they met cadence? Truth likes ordinary shoes. So here is a living footnote. Annika, a lighthouse keeper's apprentice on Sweden's west coast, learned to listen to foghorns and read wave periods during nights when the sea argued with itself. When a winter squall knocked out power, she shut the door, wound the manual lens, and kept the beam turning by hand until dawn. You don't fight the water, she told a visiting inspector. You respect the period and keep the light honest. Weeks later, their logbook quiet, precise, proved the timeline that saved a fishing crew whose radio had failed. No speech, just a kept light. Your strength has felt like that, not dramatic, but isochronous steady period. Clean signal, lives guided. They are studying you now, not in curiosity, but in fear, collecting screenshots, mapping habits, trying to reverse engineer resilience. Yet the data keeps contradicting their thesis. You aren't angry, you aren't pleading, and you aren't orbiting their approval. If God is for us, who can be against us? Romans 8:31 is less a banner than a bearing. and bearings don't argue, they align. The version of you they tried to erase no longer exists. The person who emerged carries a calibration that exposes counterfeit power by simply moving true. There's smoke and mirrors still below. But your path has become an attractor. In the phase space events bend toward clarity, not confusion. They called their failure to break you luck. It wasn't. It was providence acting through practice. Small obediences repeated until they formed a homoetic groove flow, returning to form after disturbance. Your inner life functions like a well-tuned resonator, truth as the fundamental, mercy as the overtone, courage as the sustained note. Anything off-key either tunes or leaves. And because you refused retaliation, their report now reads itself. Isn't that why their timelines keep arguing with their tone? Isn't that why their confidence flickers whenever your quiet arrives? Here is the core they cannot swallow. You became the loophole in their laboratory. The clause heaven wrote that nullifies experiments in control. Many are the afflictions of the righteous, but the Lord delivers him out of them all. Psalm 34-19 did not promise an easy road. It promised an exit that holds Peter. They did not merely fail to end you, they accidentally published your unstoppability. And now the audit has changed subjects. No longer, how fragile are you, but how hollow is their throne. So rise. Keep the light honest. Walk with the rhythm that storms cannot reset. Let your eyes stay clean, and you're not kind. And let your steps continue to embarrass false forecasts. You are not the case. You are the correction. Still standing. Still sent. And the script has already admitted whose hands hold the pen. They laughed while you were quiet. And now they tremble when you speak. The plot twist no one rehearsed. Back then, your stillness was misread as surrender. They crowned themselves narrators of your life, penciling in endings you never signed. They filled blank spaces with bravado, rewrote scenes in their favor, and used your name as a prop to polish their image. Yet, behind that hush, something fierce was forming. Your silence was not a vacuum, it was a vault. There is a time to keep silent, and a time to speak. Ecclesiastes 3-7. And heaven had you in the interval between inhale and trumpet. What changed inside you when quiet stopped feeling like exile and started feeling like strategy? What shifted in the room the moment your stillness began to carry voltage? You weren't retreating, you were rebuilding. Wounds converted to wisdom. Grief distilled into discernment. And your spirit, once spattered with other people's noise, began sharpening like a blade left to temper in sacred fire. His word is in my heart like a fire shut up in my bones. Jeremiah 20-9 whispered through the marrow. And when you finally spoke, it wasn't to win an argument, it was to release truth. You didn't shout. You didn't campaign. You simply opened your mouth. And hairline fractures appeared in foundations that had looked indestructible under stage lights. Isn't it telling that the same voices that mocked your quiet now check the exits when you say one sentence? Your words carry a different weight because they were forged in the silence of God's workshop. He put a new song in my mouth, a hymn of praise to our God. Many will see and fear, and put their trust in the Lord. Psalm 40-3 is no longer ink on a page, it is the timbre in your voice. Where once you sought to be heard, now you're commissioned to unveil gently, clearly, unflinchingly. The performance economy can't metabolize that. False peace curls like paper near a steady flame, and your sentences have become that flame. Why do masks loosen when you speak without venom? Why do rumors deflate when your calm arrives? Creation has been preaching this pattern for ages. The night blooming cereus holds its fragrance for the precise hour. Darkness is deepest, the bloom is brief. The impact, unforgettable. Your testimony moves with the same timing. The kingfisher drops in silence, cuts the surface without a splash, and emerges with sustenance. Your truth lands like that, no theatrics, only accuracy. Far north, bowhead whales sing in frequencies that travel under ice for miles. A low hymn that carries where sunlight can't. Your voice now rides those long wavelengths, reaching hearts beyond the reach of the spotlight, and high on cold cliffs. Lichen writes slow chemistry across stone, turning granite into soil. Your steady words are doing the same, making ground where none existed. History hands you good company. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, U.S. The Supreme Court Justice, known for precise, quiet dissents, once explained that sharp reasoning could move mountains without raising its tone. Over years, the lines she wrote calmly from the minority ceded future law. That's the architecture of your speech, not noisy. Necessary blueprints that outlast the headlines. And in sacred music, Olivier Messiaen's quartet for the end of time, composed in a prisoner of war camp, turns silence into a cathedral where the clarinet floats like a prayer. The piece doesn't argue. It reveals. It reveals. Your cadence works like that. Revelation over performance. Presence over volume. Scripture had signaled this day. The lion has roared, who will not fear? The Lord God has spoken, who can but prophesy? Amos 3-8. Your sentences aren't weapons, they are X-rays. They name the fracture without shaming the bone. And because they carry assignments, they cut through spin with surgical calm. So shall my word be, it shall not return to me void. Isaiah 55-11. People begin to ask quiet questions. Stories start to unspool. Perception slips from the grip of those who preferred the dark. Their laughter fades, replaced by the shuffle of retreat, because the room has learned the difference between noise and authority. Real-world power recognizes this physics too. Satya Nadella, tech CEO, who steered a culture from defensiveness to curiosity, summed it with disarming clarity. Empathy is not soft, it's strategic. He pared back bluster, listened hard, and let measured words redirect a giant. Your revival has the same vector, mercy with a spine, kindness with boundaries, clarity with no need to humiliate, no gavel, yet verdicts land. And though the crowd may crave spectacle, heaven favored substance. You did not need a platform to recover. Your recovery became the platform. You did not need applause to validate. Your alignment validated itself. The same silence they ridiculed turned into soil. And from that soil rose a voice they cannot mute. It burns without smoke. It illuminates without glare. It disarms without pettiness. He drew me up from the pit and set my feet upon a rock. Psalm 40-2 is the cradle beneath your feet. The stability shows. Now the pattern is plain. The more you speak with love, clarity, and conviction, the faster the counterfeit architecture collapses. Not a meltdown, not a brawl. A steady bell that calls the hour. And yes, some will flinch as if judgment walked in with you. But that tremor is only the conscience recognizing daylight. Your quiet was the calm before revelation. Your voice is the alarm clock they cannot unplug. So rise. Keep the register low, the message clean, and the heart soft. Stand in the doorway they once barred and speak like a lantern, no drama, just light. You are not here to trade insults. You are here to end illusions. Carry this sentence like a mantle. What was mocked in silence now governs in speech. You're not the problem, you're the prophecy they dreaded would ring the town bell at dawn. From the first glance they felt it. Something in you was gloriously off script. A refusal to march in the hush that kept everyone else in single file. You didn't chase applause or bow to rules whispered in hallways. You questioned what others were trained to swallow and saw what many were taught to ignore, and that made you dangerous. Not because you were unruly, but because you were awake. I will pour out my spirit on all flesh. Your sons and your daughters shall prophesy. Joel 2:28 was already alive in your ribs. And the fog of control, guilt thinly robbed as care. Fear marketed as wisdom. Tradition, dressed up as truth, began to lift the hour you arrived. Why did minds start shifting simply because you stood there? Why did old certainties wobble when your calm crossed the threshold? You became a frequency that shakes foundations. Not just words, the weight of a life aligned. People felt it before they named it. Questions rose. Arithmetic that never added up demanded a new sum. For nothing is hidden that will not be made manifest. Luke 8:17 threaded through the room. And suddenly the wallpaper confessed seams. You weren't sent to blend in, you were sent to interrupt. Heaven set you down like a timed charge beneath a counterfeit platform, not to harm people, but to free them from the scaffolding that held them captive. At first, you were just surviving, healing, staying true, yet truth inside you was so unnegotiable that systems around you began exposing themselves. Recycled lies, hollow crowns, mission, statements with no mission. Isn't it telling that masks slipped hardest where you kept your voice kind? Isn't it obvious now that your presence, not your posture, was what rattled the room? History already wrote a footnote for this moment. Václav Havel, the Czech playwright and dissident who later became president, described living in truth as a quiet refusal to participate in the lie. His gentle defiance cracked a regime's performance until reality flowed back into public life. That's the architecture of your assignment, not noisy revolt, but daylight, in sacred sound. Gregorio Allegri's Miserere threads a single soaring line through a hush so deep that the silence seems to glow. Nothing shouts, yet everything is revealed. Your cadence works the same way. Revelation over spectacle, presence over volume. Arise, shine, for your light has come. Isaiah 60:1 is no longer a banner, it's your baseline. Creation mirrors it in living parables. Lodgepole pine cones stay sealed with resin until fire passes. Heat doesn't end the forest. It awakens it, and new green writes itself across the black. Arctic terns navigate oceans on a magnet the eye can't see, uncoached. They keep to a path that confounds maps. Glass eels ride, nocturnal tides up, estuaries few dare to enter, carrying the ocean in their small loaf. Insistent bodies. Fireweed blooms on ash, painting ruin with color before most plants dare return. Your presence carries that ecology, a holy disturbance that restores, a compass that doesn't argue, a bloom that proves the burn wasn't the end. Of course. Counterfeit power scrambles. They patched cracks, staged unity, issued statements, and called you the hazard. But the hazard was the lie being starved. Everything exposed by the light becomes visible. Ephesians 5:13 did its quiet work. And the room realized why your hands never flipped tables out of rage. You were there to reset the room for a feast. See, I have set you this day over nations and over kingdoms, to pluck up and to break down, to build and to plant. Jeremiah 1:10 isn't an excuse to smash, it's a commission to rebuild on rock. Why did their scripts stutter whenever you spoke softly? Why did the crowd drift toward you without choreography? A dossier on a villain clarifies the cost of performance. Consider Harvey Weinstein, an industry titan who used fear, access, and myth to police a whole ecosystem until testimonies converged. Investigations compiled, receipts, and the edifice collapsed into convictions and prison. The consequence wasn't a rumor, it was a verdict. Structures built on coercion can mimic order, but they cannot sustain daylight. In the same way, your steady fidelity, not outrage, has become the stress test of a culture where the foundation is true. It stands taller where it's false. It fails quietly, then all at once. Meanwhile, prophecy kept walking in your shoes. You didn't come to sit at their table, you came to turn it right side up. They raced to discredit you, to repossess a narrative that no longer belongs to them, but the hour has shifted. Arise. Shine keeps ringing, for the Lord will expose the purposes of the heart, beats in counterpoint cf. 1 Corinthians 4-5, and your presence pure, unbought, unbothered, continues to recalibrate the room. You weren't the scandal unfolding, you were the promise arriving. From false alarms to forced alliances, from whisper campaigns to public choreography, every move has only highlighted one fact. You were never the threat, you were the truth, interrupting a system that ran on untruth. So rise, carry daylight like a mantle. Keep your eyes clean, you're no kind. Your steps steady. You are not here to trade insults. You are here to end illusions. What heaven declared over you will not be drowned by sirens. It will be amplified by endurance. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? Psalm 27:1 is the voltage in your chest. Walk forward, unhurried. The smoke is clearing. The rituals have failed, and the prophecy is doing what prophecy does, fulfilling itself right in front of their eyes. Let's end where all real stories end, at the unveiling. After everything we've walked through together, the surveillance turned inside out. The rituals that stopped working. The spell breaking in broad daylight, one truth towers above the noise. When God clothes a person, recognition becomes inevitable. You didn't chase the spotlight. The light found you because your life began resonating at the frequency of purpose. That's why they whisper about your look. It isn't the cut of a jacket or the angle of a lens. It's the unmistakable silhouette of someone carried by grace, shoulders dropped. Gaze clear, steps aligned. Heaven's tailoring shows. People say, why is everyone obsessed? Because your presence answers questions they've been too tired or too trained to ask. Because peace, when it finally fits, looks like a revolution. Because integrity is rare enough to feel like an apparition until it keeps arriving. And arriving. And arriving. This is why rooms tilt when you enter and settle when you speak. It's not performance. It's calibration. God's chosen ones don't need to convince, they reveal. And revelation makes critics nervous, bystanders thoughtful, and captives suddenly hungry for keys. Here's the secret most image gurus won't tell you. Your look is the afterglow of deeper architecture. The bones are the truth. The fabric is mercy. The seam is courage. The hem is restrained. Wear that, and fashion follows. God doesn't crown a costume, he crowns character. That's why your glow lingers after the photos drain out into yesterday, because the glow isn't staged. It's sourced. You didn't purchase influence, you became evidence. You didn't learn 20 tricks, you learned one, allegiance. And now, without forcing anything, you carry a quiet authority that makes fake power run out of battery. So the conclusion is not be louder or be latest. The conclusion is stay aligned. Keep your eyes clean and your no kind. Keep your eyes on the assignment, not the aisle. Keep your heart soft enough to hear God and strong enough to ignore the chorus of control. Keep stewarding the body, the mind, the voice He entrusted to you, because stewardship is the only styling that never goes out of season. When storms come, and they do, the wardrobe of the chosen is simple: truth, tenderness, holy stubbornness. That's the look. That's the talk of the town. Now, I want to ask you to participate in this movement of clarity and courage. If this message lit something inside you, if it put words to your journey, or gave you a breath you didn't know you needed, tap, like so the algorithm can't pretend it didn't hear you. Share this with a friend who's on the edge of their own unveiling. Drop a comment with the line that met you today. We read them. We reply. And more often than you think, your words become someone else's lifeline. And if you haven't already, subscribe and turn on the bell, not for noise, but for a steady drip of nurture, fresh teaching, prayer, and practical tools to keep you aligned when the town gets loud. To those who've gone above and beyond with super, thanks. Your generosity turns ideas into impact, lighting cameras, opening doors, and keeping this space ad-free in the ways that matter most. We see you, we honor you, and to those who simply show up with attention and a willing heart, you are just as essential. This house is built by faithfulness, not price tags. Whether you give dollars or devotion, you are part of the story God is writing through this channel. Before we go, receive this. May your steps be guarded and your pace be wise. May your face keep catching the quiet light that doesn't shout but never fades. May your discernment be gentle enough to restore and firm enough to refuse counterfeits. May the rooms you enter breathe easier because truth just walked in wearing kindness. May the outfits of anxiety slide off you like ill-fitting cloth. And may the garments of praise, peace, and holy confidence feel natural on your skin. If you have been mislabeled, may heaven's name for you drown out the old headlines. If doors have been slammed, may the door that matters open with ease. If you feel late, may you discover you are precisely on time. And finally, may the one who chose you keep choosing you in public, the way he already has in secret. May your life stay unbothered by borrowed thrones, unbribed by cheap applause, and unstoppable in good works. The town can talk. Let it. You were never dressed for them, you were fitted for destiny. If this blessed you, like, share, comment, and subscribe, and pass the blessing forward. Thank you for every view, every prayer, every super thanks, and every quiet amen you never post. We are grateful for you. Peace over your house, strength in your hands, and light on your path today and always.
Hard in the motherfucking paint, nigga.